Thank you guys, can you hear me okay? Yep. Good. Today I'm going to talk to you about migrating and vapour phase corrosion inhibitors. Does anybody know what they are already? Shall I sit down? No. We'll run through it and we'll go through a few things. I've got a couple of questions for Ron Berry along the way, since he's sitting near the poster. But Jeff, thank you for your speech this morning. Interesting, you were talking about water and tanks, and because New Zealand's nearly all around the coast, it's nearly all seawater, so lots of corrosion there. Wayne was talking about corrosion under insulation, and especially at the ports and the extrusions, and I'll be covering some of that in this as well. Fazal was talking about probe selection. There's nothing like a good bit of probe selection, I think. And it's a bit like picking a violin, isn't it? Getting the right violin. Mick was talking about the black art, and I learned a whole lot today about diggers and the new buckets and the teeth, which I didn't really need to know, but now I know, which is great. Interesting talking to Wayne and listening to him talking about his meter. One of my previous roles was an auditor in the food industry, and I managed a team of auditors. We had the same sort of equipment, and so I used to set it up for the guys and run it, and I had a look at his equipment during the break, and yes, there are games on that machine if anybody wanted to know. There's a couple of good games on there, and there's a music player too, so yeah, I think you'll have to go and sack all his team, because it looks like they've been playing bubbles in solitaire for quite some time on it. And finally, Garth was talking about the key is preparation and application, and that applies to all the talks we've had today. So I'd like to start by telling you a bit about vapour phase and corrosion, vapour phase and migrating corrosion inhibitors. And essentially, they're the same thing. So they're on the same technology. They're a blend of amine salts and carboxylic acid. They work in different applications. Migrating corrosion inhibitors are generally for concrete, but they work by migrating into the concrete or as a vapour into the concrete, to the rebar, and the vapour phase ones are generally for all other types of applications. Been around for a long time, been used in a lot of different applications. They're one of those other dark arts that we talked about, and there's a good photo of dark art coming up as well. So it's not a great photo, and it's no representation of any of our coating suppliers in the room, but you'll see with the traditional coating there are a few gaps here and there, but with the vapour phase, the theory is that vapour goes down into those gaps, and it goes down into those gaps and seals them off. So you've got full protection at the monomolecular level with a very good coating over the top of it. So we're not saying do this instead of a coating, it's do this with a coating, and it also is complementary with CP as well. Here's the dark art I was talking about. This is vapour phase corrosion inhibitor at 100 ppm on a steel pipe, and here's the control pipe that wasn't measured with the rust. It's up to 2,200 hours. How do they work? You're probably you may be familiar with the migrating corrosion inhibitors, used a lot on concrete, used to seal rebar essentially. So where you've got breaks in rebar or breaks in the epoxy in rebar, you can paint the product on, then seal it, and the migrating corrosion inhibitor goes through the porous concrete and attracts to the rebar, and it sticks on the rebar with a very small monomolecular level there, just to seal the steel. We use a lot of these in electrical cabinets, where you've got maybe down at the port or down at your sewage plants where you've got really aggressive conditions. We'll put a vapour phase corrosion inhibitor into that control box. It emits the layer of VPCI across all the metal surfaces and stops it corroding, and it doesn't interfere with the electrical equipment at all. We're doing some work up with Refinery NZ at the moment, because they are very conscious about where they are in the environment, very close to the water. So we're doing some work with them on their electrical boxes. So Wayne talked before about corrosion under insulation, and this is quite common in a lot of our industries, oil and gas. It's also very common in the dairy industry. There's a whole lot of pipes out there, a lot in geothermal as well, which are insulated, and people walk on them, have all sorts of issues with, climb all over them, do repair work on them, and can cause a whole lot of issues. This is a photo of just a simple system. Sorry, the slides are a bit out. So with the corrosion inhibitor, we inject it into a multiple permanent liquid inhibitor, injected into different ports. We use the Cortec product, which is in this case is a VPCI 658. It's designed specifically for that, and we measure it with the ER probes, which we talked to before from Gazelle. You'll notice on the slide over here that the banner that Wayne probably put together, or Ron put together, it's got a whole lot of pipelines on there, and if you have a close look at it, you'll see inspection ports and probe ports and all sorts of things on there as well. So it looks a bit like that. You've got the permanent vapor phase inhibitor injection points and then the probe points as well to measure. We inject the migrating corrosion inhibitor in, and it migrates around the whole surface. So it's going in at one point, but it's continuing around the whole pipe surface, and then we've got monitoring points as we go. You would have seen a few of those around Taranaki, no doubt. Ron, you seen any of those? Yeah. A lot of those around, so that it's just a graphic of that. And so here we have how it works. We've got the inner carrier pipe and then on the outside we've got the outside casing. And the vapor phase corrosion inhibitor is in the water phase. It's on the interface between the water and the air, and it's also in the air phase. And it's protecting the carrier pipe and the inside of the casing as well. Testing with probes, we looked at probes before, different ones, it depends which file end you want, but it's a great way to measure the corrosion rate on a system like this. So probe and flange fittings are adjustable, attached to the jacket and insulated, and then we take regular measurements along with the testing gear. Probably the one that Wayne was using these games on it, but he's probably using it for real work. So here we have the system. The Corrosion system is to apply the VPCI, put in the probes at the same time, intermittently test in real time the data, and replenish as needed. And they say that the VPCI will last up to a couple of years, but it depends how long it's in the system and how well sealed the system is, and what's on the outside of it. Because it migrates to metal surfaces, if there's a way for it to get out to attract to a metal surface, it will. We found that in the food industry when we did some cabinets with them. It's nearly all stainless steel in a meat plant, and they've got a lot of water and other issues. So in their electrical cabinets and in their control boxes, we put the corrosion inhibitors in there. And if they're opening and closing all the time, we got about a 2-year life out of them. If they kept them sealed, we've had some up to nearly 4 years without any sort of corrosion issues at all. The other thing I wanted to talk about today was a real life case history, and it's a heat exchanger bundle, and it was preserved using the Cortec. This was done in Australia. Some of you might recognise it, some of you won't. I won't tell you where it's at, just due to confidentiality. But yeah, it's been around for a while. So it's a carbon steel shell and tube heat exchanger. So there's 415 tubes. They wanted to lay it up, and they wanted the scope was to preserve it for 5 or 6 years. Okay, and they also wanted to go in at short notice. So what do? Initially we fogged it with a VPCI powder. So we fogged in all the tubes. That went on for some time, and then we sealed the tubes. We then applied the liquid coating to the outside. We shrink wrapped it in another film which contained the VPCI, and we put it in a timber crate and off for storage. So we fogged all the tubes, as I said, and then we sealed each and every one of them. So we had the vapor phase corrosion inhibitor inside the tubes. We then coated the outside of the shell and tube tubes, and then we wrapped it in the VPCI film. Now this film has got the vapor phase corrosion inhibitor inside the film. So when we got it in there, wrapped it around it, it was emitting vapor phase corrosion inhibitor onto the metal surfaces as well. We can get this in multiple lengths and sizes. You can get it as small as a Ziploc bag to put your tools or your fishing gear in, right up to bigger things than this. There's a good thing on the web if you get a chance to go. They're wrapping a tank in one of the Arab countries just to see how it worked and how well it worked. They had one tank standing out just in the desert, and they wrapped another one when they came back, I think it was 6 months later, they couldn't start the first tank. It was all corroded. There was all sorts of issues. It took them nearly a week to get it going again. They unlocked the one that was in the bag and it started up straight away. So if you get a chance on YouTube, go and have a look. Excuse me. Once they finished doing that, they got the heat guns out and they shrink wrap it so it's all ready to go, nice and tight and sealed, and make sure it was sealed. And then they packed it into a crate. And that was a few years ago now. It's still in the crate. They haven't had to use it as yet, but it's all ready to go when they want. They've done some inspections over the top and there's no corrosion. So really interesting stuff. If there are any questions you want to ask me about that, feel free to do so. I can explain a few other bits if you'd like.
Just on that, I think the point you missed, which is important because we use it a lot, is the product is water soluble in most instances, so you don't have to. In the old inhibitors, you have to flush them out. We actually mothball the plant, total gas production plant.
Yeah.
And at the client's request, we double dosed it with immersed product and powders and stuff in containers. We actually got 5 years life out of it by double dosing.
Wow.
They were very happy, and after 4 years we went in and retreated the whole thing again. So,
Do you know what dose rate you used?
sorry?
Do you know what dose rate you used when you said you double dosed it? Do you know how much you used? What?
Yeah, we used about 200 kilos, so it was a fairly big plant. But we sealed off pipes that were out in the yard, dosed them up. We had heat exchange, we had printed circuit heat exchangers, they filled with water and put it in.
Yep.
We had pressure vessels, we had everything. It was a huge gas process plant that was subject to litigation, so we had to preserve it. And it worked really well. The only issue we had is the client wouldn't invest in corrosion, atmospheric corrosion probes to prove how it went. So rather than invest in probes, which would have only cost them a couple of grand, you got us to retreat the whole thing again.
It's cost them a fair bit more than a couple of grand, no doubt.
It was a very successful thing, but the beauty of it was they could then immediately decide to put it back into service. They just put water through the system and off it went. So
Yeah, that's right. Flush it out and away you go. Because as I say, it protects.
You can put it in the creek and it doesn't kill the fish.
Yeah. Yeah, some amazing technology. I've got some cans of electrocore, which is electrical spray, but it also has the corrosion inhibitor as well. And I didn't bring any with me today, but they're really good because you can. Sorry, give me your card. I'll send you one. But yeah, they're really good because they do the electrical cleaning and they do the protection as well. I'm serious about that. Yep.
Not a question. Last month in Auckland, I was at another conference, and one of the presenters was a structural engineer who had designed a new footbridge to go across the motorway. And he won some prizes for it for his innovation in corrosion protection and design. And he had used untreated steel for all of the box section, all of the box section.
Yeah.
It wasn't full like the hull of the ship. And I said to him afterwards, there's only one thing missing from the equation. You should have chucked some vapor phase inhibitors into the void spaces before you sealed it off. He had no idea what I was talking about. So if you want to get onto the web and go back onto Conference, track him down, because he's a structural engineer, and I think a lot of these guys don't understand that he was working on the basis, so it's a sealed section. The oxygen will be depleted in a certain number, but they don't know how long that takes, so they don't know what their corrosion rates are. I said to him, simple, just chuck some of the powder in there and seal it up, and away you go.
Yeah.
You've never heard of it.
No, right.
So there's a market there.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Yeah, that's good. You get a crack in that too. You've got all sorts of issues.
Yeah,
as well, which is
all of that. Yeah.
which happens. I was in the dairy industry for a lot of years, and some of the plants we pulled out were old and decommissioned. They were just horrendous, with micro growth inside the box steel and other things. And, I mean, now they don't build plants with box steel anymore. But this was quite a few years ago. We didn't swab it because we were too scared to find out what was in it.
Just take the injections like a man.
Well, thank you for that.
We use that shrink film in order to plan, you may have to store tanks or heat exchangers for a longer time.
Mm.
But I'm just curious to know, like, what's the chance of corrosion getting in if you make any a small hole or once to start getting in once you shrink wrap and heat it?
Well, it depends. If it's sealed and it's stored, and you've done all the procedures up front to make sure that it's right, you should get, as I say, 4 or 5 years out of the system if it's done properly. Cortex say 2 years. They say you should go and replenish it every 2 years, but they've been very cautious on that. I know they had some emitters that they had sealed that they had in their office when they first started, and they were 20 years old, and they used those after 20 years, and they worked for 2 years without the issue. So having them sealed in a container, they were fine. So yeah, as long as your preparation's good and you can seal it, then you have no issues. Once you start getting openings or people opening electrical cabinets to look inside, you get other things being introduced. It shortens the life of it.
Cool. Any questions? Thank you.
Thanks guys, appreciate it.